Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. All right, today we are welcoming a lifelong athlete who played and coached club and collegiate volleyball. She's been competing now since 2016 and just went pro at NPC Universe in 2020 while working as a sales executive marketing rep for Ticor Title and living the wife and dog mom life. Welcome to the show, Maeghan Egli. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing so good. How are you?
I'm awesome. Like I said, I'm so happy you're here and you listen to the show, so you know what I'm about to ask you, which is, do you have a ritual or something you do or think about right before your heel hits the stage?
It's so funny because since I listened to the show, I've already been thinking about that question. And I definitely thought back to the shows that I've done, and I'm like, is there any consistency there? Like, have I done anything? And the only thing that stands out consistently is that I just am chit-chatting with the girls in line. So I don't have like a ritual. I don't zone out. I don't, envision my posing. I'm usually in like a pretty deep conversation with the girl in front and behind me. And I think that's probably to distract myself from the nerves, but that's the only thing that I've really done on a consistent basis, which I really love because I've met a lot of people and like learned about their journey in that short, 20 minutes that you're standing in line
Mhm.
backstage.
Yeah,
But yeah.
definitely. I love that. It's like such a great opportunity to connect with people, and we're kind of all almost like sardines in a can just waiting to go out there. And sometimes it's nice to just be able to like actually have that conversation. Like I had such a great time at my last show talking to girls in line, and it was so fun. And sometimes like I am in like focus mode, or I notice people around me are in focus mode, but it is nice when we get to connect that way. And I would love to just jump right into your journey through competing and really how you got where you are now. So you had done your first prep starting in 2016 to compete in 2017. And what was it that inspired you to get into competing, and what inspired the long prep?
So I had been training with a trainer just at my local gym every time I came home for like a winter or a summer break to stay in shape for volleyball. So I would come home for my breaks and train with this trainer and then go back to college and be ready to go for my season. And I came back after graduating from college, and the trainer had seen me in the gym. I was still like training super hard, but I wasn't training for any purpose. I was just training. And he was like, hey, you should do a bodybuilding competition. There's one here in Oregon in May. Like, you should totally do it, and I'll prep you for it. And I am just so oblivious to what was going on. I was like, yeah, totally, sure, let's do it. And
Wow.
so I just jumped right in without knowing. I had no idea what it was all about. I didn't know anything at all. And he had never prepped anybody before. And he was like, he was honest about that. He said, I've never prepped anyone, so you'll be my first person, and I'll only charge you, I don't remember. It was like super inexpensive, like $100 a month. Um, and he's like, and we'll prep you. And so we started in November of 2016 with the intention of doing the show in May, which was the Cascadian Classic in 2017. And from there, it was very interesting. He had me I mean, he's a great person. Like, no, I'm not saying anything bad about him, but he had never prepped anybody for a show. So like the meal plan, it was like full on like fancy meals. It was like honey roasted almond salmon, and like it was just really complicated. And if anybody, obviously people listening to this have an interest in bodybuilding, and so they know the simpler usually the foods are, the easier it is to control the variables. And we did not go about it like that in the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
then what was it? Probably like 4 or 5 weeks in, I was getting leaner, but things were just, it was obvious that he did not have an idea of what he was doing. And so he actually brought in one of his friends, who ended up being my coach for the first 2 years of my journey. But he brought his friend in because he had competed before, and asked him to kind of help us. And then after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, I fired the trainer guy
Mm-hmm.
and was like, I don't feel right paying you when this other guy is doing all the work. So then I spoke with, his name is Brandon. He was my first coach. I spoke with him and said, hey, are you comfortable like continuing this and prepping me until the show? And he had never prepped clients before either.
Wow.
And he was like, yeah, like I'm game. And so the rest is history. I stayed with him for the first 2 years of my competition. But yeah, that's how I got into it. Just a trainer was like, hey, you should do this. And I was like, okay.
Wow, that's amazing. You really went in blindly, but then through that prep and understanding like your body and the changes, you persevered and decided, okay, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it in the best way possible. And then you continued working with this newer coach as well for 2 years, but you did switch coaches later on again. And what inspired that? Like, how did you know you needed to switch coaches, and what were some of those major differences you appreciate now between Brandon and then the coaches you're working with currently?
Yeah. So after Brandon and I had a super successful 2 years in competing. And because him and I were kind of learning as we go and experiencing things for the first time, like I experienced the national stage for the first time, as well as he experienced a client on the national stage for the first time. So we were learning together. And I got to the point where I was like, I love this sport and I want to pursue it in a competitive way. And I just felt like him and I kind of outgrew each other in the sense of I needed someone that was already ahead of me in knowledge, not learning with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hired Shane Hughley, and he's, I mean, really well known in the industry for taking competitors to the national level and getting them to that pro level. So I looked into other coaches, but I spoke with Shane, and I just knew that was the right choice because I knew that I needed someone who had already been in the game, knew that level of where I wanted to get to instead of kind of growing linearly.
Mm-hmm.
And Brandon, I adore him and his wife. They were amazing. Like they came to my wedding, like we
Oh,
are family. Yeah. And so I think it's super important if you're an athlete and you're wanting to look at other coaches. And, you know, especially since I'd been with him for 2 years, I did it in what I thought was the most respectful way possible. I talked to him about it. I was open. I said, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm looking at, you know, and
mm-hmm.
I think it's important to be transparent with your current coach if you're looking into other coaches. And it ended nicely and we're still friends. We've trained together a few times. Like, yeah, but I just knew I needed to tap into somebody that was already competitive at the level that I wanted to be at.
Yes, that makes total sense. And other coaches have even spoken about that before too, where they'll say like sometimes you need a coach for a certain season or depending on where you're at level wise. And it's nice to have people who have like been there, done that and can guide you there. And I could see why, at first it made sense to grow and learn with someone, and then once you got that first national show under your belt and you did incredible at the first national show, I imagine it was like, okay, well, I don't, like you said, you don't want to grow linearly. So I would love to know if it was like, what was it like to step away after your first national show and having such a great placing there to then grow and take that time off?
Yeah, that national show. Celeste, I have to be honest, like I and my husband and I were talking about this the other day. The universe totally delivers when you're ready, because I stepped on to that national stage having no idea what a pro card was. I had no idea what placing meant. I was just like, similarly to when my trainer said, "Do you want to compete?" And I was like, "Yeah." When I got nationally qualified and Brandon was like, "Do you want to go to nationals?" I was like, "Sure." But I literally had no idea what it even meant. And
Oh.
some people think that's, ignorance, but I was just like, I was just enjoying the sport
Yeah.
and doing it because I loved it. But I went into that show just with the thought of, I'm just going to compete because I have so much fun doing it. And then after that, my husband, he proposed to me 2 weeks before nationals. So,
Wow.
yeah, so we got engaged. And at that moment, I had told myself, we want to get married in a year. After this show, I'm just going to focus on like wedding prep and just life stuff. So it was already decided in my head before even my placing that I was going to take time off and not compete until after the wedding. And we had set our wedding date exactly a year later on a Saturday. So it ended up being July the following year. So I knew for sure if I competed again, it wouldn't be until later that fall of the next year.
And that explains why then you kicked off with NPC Nationals. Now, I do want to backtrack just a little because I like how you said you really didn't know what to expect going into your first national show, and it was just the love of the game, right? The love of the sport that was
For
bringing you in
sure.
there. Do you feel like that influenced the way you showed up that day on the USA stage that allowed you to place, I believe you placed top fifth? Was it fifth or fourth? Fourth.
I got fourth. Yeah. I got fourth in that show. Um, maybe it's because of that, but honestly, story time, that was
Yeah.
the most, I'll never forget that show ever in my life because I have a scar to remember it.
Oh no. What happened?
So, oh gosh. So I am literal to a fault. So if a plan says eat at 8 a.m., I will not eat 1 minute before. And so I woke up the morning of prejudging, and at the time, the protocol with my previous coach was the night before, I had 4 ounces of wine. We did water cutting. So I woke up definitely dehydrated. And like,
Yeah.
you don't drink your entire prep and then 4 ounces of wine, you're such a lightweight, like, you definitely feel it. So I woke up the morning of my prejudging day, and I had to go get my tan touched up, and it was like 7:30, 7:45. And I was like, okay, I'm supposed to eat at 8, but it's not quite time. I'll just eat when I get back. So I go to get my tan touched up, and you know how it is. It's all
Mhm.
fumey in there, all the chemicals, and I was dehydrated, and I was empty, depleted. And so I got super dizzy, like standing in line. And I step into the tanning tent, and before you know it, I pass out. And I've
Oh
never done
no.
that in my life. And so I passed out in the tanning tent, woke up instantly, and I had hit the underside of my chin on the fan that they put to dry you. They put those little, like, it
Mhm.
looks like a picture frame cover over it.
Yeah.
I had hit the side of, or I hit underneath my chin, and it ended up splitting open my chin.
Oh
And
my gosh.
It was insane. So I actually stepped on stage for prejudging with like makeshift bandages underneath, like had to hold the tissue seconds before going on stage because the bleeding wouldn't stop. Went on stage, came off.
Oh my
After
gosh.
prejudging, ended up going to the ER later that night and got 12 stitches.
Stop.
Yeah, got 12 stitches and then went back the next day because that was when they were doing 2 day like
Right.
nationals, right? Went back the next day and did finals with like brand new stitches in my face. So I
Oh
can't
my
say I was
gosh.
like relaxed going into that show because of what happened, but lessons learned, like don't cut water and you don't need wine the night before, and eat if you're dizzy.
Whoa. Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh. I'm actually
very
so
memorable.
I can't believe that. First of all, in the photos when I was looking through NPC News, I didn't notice it, which says a lot
Hmm.
about your diligence in covering it up. But also, what a crazy story and lesson this is, because I've not had, as you know, no one's come on and shared a story about them passing out or feeling dizzy or feeling like complete crap, or how their process may have impacted them. And
Yeah.
so, can you explain maybe how after that show that might have changed your peaking approach, or the way you viewed bodybuilding, even, and how that maybe influenced your decision in hiring Shane?
Yeah, I it's so hard because I think it could have been prevented had because it's not like I wasn't supposed to drink water or wasn't supposed to eat that morning. But I think in competing, you get in that mindset where it's like so hardcore, like you don't, just push through the suffering. But sometimes there's limits, you know what I mean? Like if you feel like dizzy or empty or whatever, like stepping on stage is not worth your health. And in that moment, like I felt like crap and I should have just like there was Sour Patch Kids back there in the tanning room. There was water, but I think you get in that mindset where you're like, no, like push past it because
Mhm.
it's such an extreme sport. But I think it's important to know that, you know, yes, it's extreme and you have to go to extreme levels, but if it comes down to like you're gonna pass out, just eat the freaking Sour Patch Kid and drink some water, like it's not gonna ruin how you look going on stage. Like I could have, the thing is, looking back on it, what a blessing that I hit the underneath part of my chin that you could not even see. It's the only
Yeah.
part on your body that you go on stage and the judges don't see, literally the only part. And so like the fact that I could have like hit my head, hit my nose, hit like anywhere else just was insane that it didn't happen that way. But just yeah, I think it's important to know what the risk you're willing to take is not your health when it comes to things like that. And then it didn't influence my switching of coaches because I kind of that was on me. Like I knew how I felt. It's not like my coach said
Mhm.
don't drink or eat. It was on me. Like I take full responsibility for that. So yeah, it didn't really affect my changing of coaches.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful story and impactful as well, to know that you had gotten to that point and you had ignored your body signs. And it's actually crazy when you say that. It takes me back to some of the shows that I did. And my mom always came with me to shows, and she'd always see someone pass out. And she's like, and my mom's super supportive. She totally understands the sport and me, and she doesn't ever, pass judgment. But when she sees girls passing out or getting wheeled off in a wheelchair, like sometimes the reality can hit where you're like, wow, we really are willing to take it there. And for what?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
that's so crazy. And it's true because we consistently throughout our prep reinforce this like all or nothing mentality, or this like grind it out 1%, be at the top of your game mentality, which is all fine. And especially given you're a collegiate athlete, I'm sure that plays a role in this too. But it's like you get into that mode where it's like, I'll do anything,
Yeah.
within like your moral standards and codes, and then something like that, it's like, I don't need the water, I don't need the Sour Patch, but in reality your body's like literally like, I'm gonna make you pass out because I can't even support you at this point. And
Right. And you, like, girls listening to this that haven't been to a national, well, actually just any stage in general, like if the judges find out you passed out, they will disqualify you.
yes.
So it's like, I know because when you sit in an athletes meeting, they talk about that. They say, and they usually talk about it for bodybuilders because the dudes are usually like super, super water cutting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they say, like, if you need water backstage and you're going to pass out, like, drink water. And they talk about you will get disqualified as a competitor if we know that you passed out. And so I remember having like worries about getting disqualified. Like, that's how all or nothing competitors get. Like, instead of being like, wow, I just busted my face open, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope the judges don't find out so I get
Yeah.
disqualified. It's just crazy.
Wow. And it's perspective, because you can reflect on that, or you can, like, an outsider can listen to that and be like, I would never get to that point, or I would never let that happen. But like the same thing goes every time we break any of our limits. Like when we push
Mm-hmm.
through on the treadmill to like a new mile per hour, or when we're like hitting new weights. Like there was a point when we said like, I would never get to that point, or I don't think I could ever do that. And then you're, 2 weeks out from a show and you're doing hour plus cardio and it's no big deal, hard cardio too. And it's like we are developing this stamina and this resiliency and this mindset to go and give your all. And so I appreciate you shining light on that. And I know that in addition to you having the wedding to plan, your body was giving you signs that you needed a break, that you had mentioned that in a post before. And I would love if you could share what some of those signs were that your body was giving you from that prep, and how you started addressing them in your improvement season.
Yeah, I probably about 3 to 4 weeks out from USA's, my first national show, my body was just stalling. Like, I was not losing the weight. I don't remember back then what cardio I was doing. I know I was doing a combination of HIIT cardio and steady state, and it was like intense. Like, I think I was doing like a session in the morning, HIIT session after lifting, and then after I ate my last meal, which was usually around like 9:30, I had to go back and do like steady state for 20 minutes or something. But my body just was like not responding. It was just stuck. And so my coach at the time reached out to some of his friends, that are in the community and our coaches as well, and was like, hey, like, what's your guys' opinion? What do you think? This is what she's eating. This is what her cardio's at. And just little things helped. Like, I don't know. They said like, okay, add in park further away, and try to, really what it came down to is like neat, like just add more regular movement in throughout the day. Because I think what was happening was I was just getting so tired that the cardio was going up, but my daily activity was going way down. Like, I was just becoming just a sloth throughout the day. Like, I just wasn't doing anything. And so it was negating the cardio. And so I just pushed super hard. I remember going and buying like one of those like bodysuit, sweatsuit things, and I would wear like a waist trainer with that and a sweatshirt and just try to like just kill myself during cardio that last couple weeks to be ready. And that is something that I so appreciate about Shane, is every show I've done with him so far, I've never for a second doubted, like, will I be ready? And that is so common in competitors. Like, I definitely have those days where self-doubt comes in and I'm like, do I look good enough? But I just trust him so much. And I obviously it's because of what I see him produce in terms of his athletes, but like, I just have no doubt about being ready. But yeah, my body was stalling really bad. I wasn't losing weight, even though food was going down, cardio was going up. And then how I addressed all of that, I don't think I really did address it properly, because after that show, I did not reverse properly. I I didn't reverse as bad as I did my first two shows, but after that show, I got to a point where I was just like, I tried to do macros and I just had no idea, and then I was just eating, like overeating at times. I think your body just eventually it gives up, and I got to a level where I was like, all right, my weight hasn't changed, but I'm not at a weight that I'm comfortable with, and I don't feel good. And then like 2 months later, I hired Shane, and
Mm-hmm.
we got things locked down. So
That's good. What did he implement with you when that happened?
so I told him that I didn't want to do macros yet, even though I was in a improvement season. I was I was just like, I just need to get my body to the point where I feel good and I'm feeling myself properly. So he does like an option where you can do meal plan with options. So you can kind of interchange your protein, carbs, and fat sources. So you don't feel like you're on a meal plan necessarily, but you have like 5 or 6 options of protein, carbs, and fats. So we got a meal plan implemented, and I'm such a, and I think from being an athlete all my life, like I always want to make the coach happy. So being with a new coach, I did not stray from plan. Even in my improvement season, I was on it, because I wanted to fully maximize what he was giving me. And I wanted to see, like, am I going to get results out of this coach? Like, what can he get me to? And so I wanted to be 100% to see what I could fully get out of him. And so he got my food up, and I was eating like simple stuff, but I was eating a lot. Cardio was down. I just got to a point where I was at a really good, maintenance, and I was adhering to the plan.
That's awesome. And do you feel like that supported you in your next prep in 2019 after your wedding?
100%. Yeah.
So you got to start at a pretty high point and then I'm assuming like work into the prep so that you could have more of that sustainability and not feel so bad physically.
Right. So we started like a tiny little mini cut, um, like 4 weeks before the wedding, because we were going to Mexico for the honeymoon, and I was like, I want to look like a little tighter.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew I was starting a prep after we got back from the honeymoon. So I literally started the prep. I think it was like a week or 2 weeks later after the honeymoon for the show in November for nationals. And so we did a little mini cut and then started prep after I got back from the honeymoon. And Shane is very slow. I don't want to give all of his goods away, right? But
Yeah,
like
of course.
he's very slow to change things, which I can appreciate, because he really squeezes the lemon for all of its juice. Like if your body's still responding, there's no need to up cardio and drop food. So I really appreciate that.
Love that. It sounds like you had a really great experience and are continuing to. And I definitely want to get more into that, but I want to go back to what you said about your background in volleyball and how that kind of encouraged you, and being an athlete your whole life encouraged you to really want to satisfy your coach, right? Like stick to the plan, adhere, and see what comes of it. How
Mm-hmm.
else has your athlete mentality been influential in your life as it pertains to, of course, this sport, but also career building and relationships?
I had a coach say one time, if it's important to you, and it's a quote, if it's important to you, you'll find a way. If it's not, you'll find an excuse. And that was like ingrained in me when she said it. Um, and I really have looked at that in all areas of my life, because with anything, like if it is truly important to you, you'll make it happen. Nothing will come in the way. I have like, we had in volleyball, we had to like run lines if we got in trouble for something. And I had parked my car somewhere and it got towed. And so I ended up being late to practice because I parked in a tow zone and I had to get my car out. And I got to practice and she made us run lines. And I was like, I couldn't, like, what do you mean? Like, my car got towed. And she drew it all the way back to, if you wouldn't have parked in that tow zone, like, you wouldn't have been towed and you wouldn't have been late to practice. And so it's like, dang, I found an excuse because I was running late. So I parked in a tow zone, and just simple things like that. Like, if something is really important to you, if you want to build your business, if you want to eat your meals, if you want to get your cardio done, like, you will not let anything stand in the way. You'll make it happen. And that in itself has just stuck with me forever through all of the sports that all the volleyball, the years of volleyball, all of the career stuff, and then now competing. Like, it's just, you'll make it happen if you really want it.
So true. And like, I can relate, especially because, I mean, we talked a little bit before we decided to record about, like, I played volleyball as well. And I remember we would have to run lines if someone showed up late, but the person who showed up late wouldn't have to run lines. And
oh no,
yes,
that's
so
the
like
worst.
they would be late by, like, let's say like 10 minutes. We had to do like 10 suicides. And I remember they'd have to like sit and watch, and it taught them responsibility and the impact on your team, right? But it also taught us, like, to hold each other accountable and to not be that person. And I remember specifically there were so many moments as an athlete growing up where a coach would say something that stuck with me, similar to what you described. And for me, it was like, you're either growing or dying. Like, there is no stagnation. There's no between. And I remember when a coach told me that, I was like, wow, like,
That's
that's so
good.
right. Like, that's so true. Like, you are either choosing to improve or you're choosing to regress. And like, I was never going to allow myself to be that person who like regressed. And that really stuck with me, and similar to how it stuck with you. And so I think being an athlete your whole life can really influence the way then you carry those life lessons that come of it into a sport that's individual, or more individual, I should say, like bodybuilding. And like you said, it's now impacted the way that you approach things in your career and in your relationships and your daily life in general. And I actually know that one of your goals this year was to read 6 books, which you've now far surpassed. So and I imagine that's one of those, you'll find a way to do it if it matters to you. You won't make an excuse. So what did you do to actually start prioritizing that and leave no room for excuses?
I added it into a routine, and it's so funny because everything in my life is like a routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to read books, and I was like, how am I going to get this done? And I'm like, obviously I need to make it a routine. Like, I need to set it in the schedule, because if I was just going at it like throw it in the air, I want to read 6 books, it was not going to happen. And so I ended up reading. I started actually reading during my steady state cardio.
Oh,
And that,
really?
yeah, which I would take my little book and get on the Stairmaster, and I had those little like clip things that you paper clips.
Mm-hmm.
I would grab those big paper clips from the office, and I would clip the book down on each side so that I could read during my steady state, because most of the time I was just scrolling on Instagram, or I was listening to music and just wasting time. And so I was like, I need to utilize this time somehow. So then I started reading during my steady state cardio. And then once the gym shut down because of COVID, I didn't read during steady state on the treadmill because it's just harder for me. And so I started reading at night. Like, I implemented a bedtime routine because, again, I'm such a routine person. And I was talking to my husband. I'm like, why don't I have a bedtime routine? Like, I need to have a bedtime routine too. So I added in a bedtime routine where I would read before bed, and it helped to relax me. And so I've just just kept doing those things. And then midway through the year, I added a morning routine and I started reading during that time. So I don't know. And I've noticed that it's weird when you're reading books. You probably know your psychology, that when you start to see things in the world that you're reading, or like if you buy a certain car, you start to see that car everywhere. It's like a psychology thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was noticing, I was reading these books and it was showing up in life, like certain things that I would learn about in the books would show up in life, and I'd be able to handle situations better because I had, more knowledge from a book. So I was like, okay, I need to keep doing this. And I just found so much enjoyment from turning other things off and just putting my head in a book.
Yes. Yes, I love that so much. And it's very interesting too, how when you start to focus on something, you really do begin to find more of it. And that's because
Yeah.
it's like our brain is attuned to like be mindful of the things that matter to us or that we're thinking about or maybe we're concerned about or just more aware of. And I like how you said that you started implementing a nighttime routine and a morning routine. And I was curious if that morning routine started after you read. I believe in your stories you posted one of your books was Miracle Morning.
Yeah, that is exactly why I started the morning routine.
Interesting. So I like how you're
Yeah.
applying it too.
Yeah, it's by Hal Elrod. And probably the first like 30 pages, I was arguing with the book. I was like, I already get up so early to do cardio. Like, I'm not going to implement this. Like, I already do so much. And then I kept reading and reading and reading. And then I was like, all right, I'm just going to try this. And the first 3 days sucked. Like, they totally sucked. But then after that, I was like, wow, this is so nice. And it was helping during COVID. I've never been an anxious person, but I was noticing with the new work from home life and everything at home, I was getting anxious like in the afternoon for no reason. And once I started that morning routine and I was doing the meditation and the breathing and the stretching and the reading, it was honestly, I was noticing in the afternoon that anxiousness was leaving. It was gone. And so I kept doing it, and it's been something I've continued on, and I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. That's something I encourage my clients to do is to have preemptive strikes against things that could, potentially come up. A lot of times, like our days can be so busy, like you were saying, like you already are waking up early, you already have a lot to do, and there's so much on our plate. And then it's like by the end of the night, all of that can hit us as soon as there's nothing else required of us. It's like suddenly that anxiety hits us. Suddenly we start feeling our emotions. We start actually becoming like present with the reality of our situation, and it all hits us at once. But when we plan out for moments in the morning or even throughout the day to just breathe or connect with ourselves or be mindful in the moment, it allows us to be proactive so that it doesn't hit us all at once. And if it does come up, our brain is now, connecting the dots to, oh, the breathing or the reading or this journaling page really supports me moving through it, rather than turning to an external source like food, drugs, alcohol, even over abusive exercise, things like that too. And also doesn't encourage us to internalize either, like storing all the emotions and bottling them up until it turns into something much worse. So I think it's really great that you're able to implement something that you already know works for you, which is routine, but now with consideration for your mental health and the needs that you were having with the changes of your life. And of course, you also work full time, and you just explained how things moved online for you. So can you tell us more about what it is that you do and then how you're managing your schedule with competing as well as your relationship?
Yeah, so I am a sales and marketing rep for a title company. So before COVID, my job really is to meet in person with real estate agents, loan officers, and get to know how they structure their business, how they market themselves, and then try to fill the holes in which they're, trying to fill. So it looks different for each client. Like some clients might need help with one thing versus another client might need something else. But when COVID happened and we had to work from home, like everybody else, Zoom became our best friend. So I then had to try to get appointments with clients via Zoom. And I think it was hard in the beginning because a lot of the realtors were like, well, let's just meet, when this goes away. Like, so it was hard. It was really hard to get clients to want to meet. And then it got to the point where everybody was Zoomed out. Like everybody had met on Zoom so much that they were like, I don't want to meet. Like, I'm over the Zoom. Let's meet in person. And so it looked different in the sense of everything had to be via Zoom, which was hard. And then relationship wise, like with my coworkers or like husband. Yeah. So he is a grower for his family's dispensary. So marijuana is legal in Oregon. So that's all he's been doing his entire career. And so nothing changed for him because they were essential, and he's the grower. So he only works with one other guy. And so his schedule didn't change at all. Like he still worked his regular days. And so I was just home by myself working in our spare room that turned into a home office. So nothing really changed for us. I mean, when he comes home from for lunch, I'm home, which is different. But nothing really changed in terms of COVID with my relationship. If anything, we saw each other more because I work 45 minutes away from where I live. And that played a huge role in the prep after COVID happened. So working from home actually made prep way easier because I was able to chunk out 2 hours of drive time. And so my days weren't as long. So normally when I'd be getting up at 4:30 to do cardio and leave the house to get to work by 8:30, 9 o'clock, I was able to get up at 5:30 and do my cardio and just shower and get ready and be at work right there at home. So I would say not that prep is ever easy, but this was, in terms of fitting things in, the easiest prep I've ever had.
Wow. Well, that's great. And it's like when you have that gift of time, it opens up your world. It's such a blessing, and I love that you were able to capitalize on it. And I know with your business too, you have started posting videos on Facebook every week, like talking about both your title company business as well as fitness. So what inspired you to start doing what you do with the sharing in the way that you do it and combining the two worlds that you love?
I tried so hard when I first started competing to keep the worlds separate because I think it can very easily, to an outsider, we're in bikinis, we're on stage showing our body, like it can be looked down on by people that don't know anything about the sport. And so I tried so hard to keep these two lives different, or not different, but separate, because I wanted to remain professional. And so I never really posted anything on Facebook about competing because I kind of kept Facebook as my business side of things. And then Instagram, I kept all the competing stuff on Instagram. But as things started to intertwine together, I was noticing clients and potential clients had like this whole other appreciation and kind of wow factor when they found out what I was doing, because I think a lot of times people aren't aware of it, but when business and health align, you just flourish. Like when you feel good, you show up good. And I had a business coach that I hired, and she was like, Maeghan, you've got to like push this more. Like people are loving this stuff. Like people get excited. And she's like, people need this, especially during COVID. Like people are gaining weight and getting unhealthy and they just are lost, and you need to combine these worlds. And so the more I've started to open up and combine the two, the more I'm seeing that it's inspiring people, and I'm getting opportunities in business that I wouldn't have gotten without opening those doors. So really it was my business coach kind of pushed me. And then just seeing there's proof in the pudding, like people are way more, like some people are willing to meet with me or talk to me or whatever because they see how hard I work in fitness. They know that those two things, fitness and business, will align.
Absolutely. And it's like coming, like, just from my perspective, I think it's easier and more inspiring to work with someone who has many areas of their life in alignment, especially if you're aspiring to have a certain level of success like they do in business, or to reach, your goals in any area of life. It's nice to see and work with someone who is exuding a level of balance, if that makes sense. Like, to see someone who's like representing not just one area of their life, but all of it. So I think it's cool that you started combining that to show people that they can do that. And, it is awesome too, because you just recently earned your pro card and you are someone who's clearly a goal getter. You're thriving off of routine. And now being a pro, do you feel any differently, no longer going after that like pro card goal, or have you felt like a shift in your goals with the sport or just in general?
I definitely have felt, which is crazy because I already felt that fire like burning to just work so hard and, reach that goal. But it's like a whole other, it's weird because I'm definitely more relaxed right now in terms of I don't have a show in mind. I'm not, you know, I don't have that all or nothing mentality right now. But I also, on the other side of things, like feel so motivated and excited, and like the fire is even brighter to be better. And, I think in the sport, you're always growing and trying to be better. And I thought one level of intensity was what I had, but once I got my pro card, it was like it turned up a notch. And I'm like, I didn't even know this notch was there. But yeah, I just feel super motivated and inspired, but also really calm about it.
Mm-hmm. Love that. And do you mind sharing like how it's influenced the way that you train or maybe show up? Like, how does it actually look for you differently when you say that?
Mm, I would say I train harder, even though it's only been a couple weeks. Like, I'm pushing even harder, like failing more with weight, where I maybe I'm just giving myself too much credit, but like I push in the gym, and I think it's really easy to get in that, what's the word I'm looking for? You just get kind of lackadaisical in your prep where you're just going through the motions, but I was hyper aware of not allowing myself to do that. And even the last 4 weeks of prep before this last show, my husband got a membership to the gym I go to because he likes working out in our garage. COVID or not COVID, he loves the
Mm-hmm.
garage gym. But we got him a membership for the last 4 weeks of my prep so that he could spot me and push me because I did not want to lower the weight. I wanted to keep pushing as long as I could. And so I even thought then, like, I am pushing weight. I'm really trying to get better and grow and never like take the shortcut. But even this last few weeks, the gyms are closed again. But in the garage gym, like my husband and I've just been, I guess, on another level of I want to get better and just pushing even harder.
I love that. And what exactly is it that you're now like focused on improving for? Like, I know you said that you are more relaxed right now in terms of not having an exact like show picked out and not in prep, but like, what is your ultimate goal now that you've reached this level?
I am reversing properly. And so a couple days after the show, I asked Shane, like, okay, for the pro level, not that I want to compete at the pro level like tomorrow, but what do I need to improve on, because I want to go into the gym, even the couple days after the show that I just got my pro card, I want to go in with intention. So I'm never just going in to train to train. So I asked him, what do I need to get better at? What do I need to improve on to be competitive at the pro level? And so more shoulders, glutes, and calves, which was I kind of laughed, but everything matters. And so on those days, I am just hyper focused. Like, these are the things. We added in another day of calves. But I'm just hyper focused on those days to really, really push till failure. And yeah.
So when you're in the gym, and I know you've probably heard me ask this question, but like, if you could only pick one exercise for glutes, one for hamstrings, and one for shoulders, what would you pick for each of those for the rest of your life?
So glutes is an easy one, and I feel like everyone says this, but hip thrusts and like heavy hip thrusts. Like, I'm not putting weight on there to do like 20 reps banded. Like, I'm putting weight on there to like fail at 8. And then for shoulders, it's like a tie up between dumbbell shoulder press with my husband spotting so that I can actually go heavy, and then lateral raises but seated. So I just started doing these a couple weeks ago, where I used to do them standing. Now I do them seated, and I feel like it puts way more focus on my shoulders because I'm not like swinging around or anything like that. So seated lateral raises, and then shoulder press or tie up, and then hamstrings. Oh, geez. Probably just the good old hamstring curl machine.
Yes.
Keep it simple.
That's awesome. And of course, now getting to this point where you turned pro, what do you feel sets you apart at Universe opposed to at North Americans?
Oh, 100% my posing. I looked back on North Americans and I was cringing at my posing.
Really?
Because if anybody was at North Americans, they know the DJ was bomb, and it felt like a club. And so I was just music has a big effect on me, and my husband kind of laughs at me about it. But like, if I'm dying and I play a good song, it gives me life. And so backstage at North Americans, the music was just bomb. And so I was way too just excited. And I practically ran on stage into the center and did my poses so fast and then came right off. So I would say number one is my posing. Like, in my head, before I went on stage at Universe, I was telling myself, slow down. And I even practiced, because the music affected me so much at North Americans. Every single day I practiced posing. I did it with my headphones on, and I played fast music. Like, a lot of times I played like Latin music because it got me like excited, and I made sure I was playing the fast music, but I was slowing down. And so at Universe, I just took my time and really like tried to get them to focus on me, the judges, and tried to take my time and show what I worked for.
Yes, I love that. And I also practice to Latin music a lot of the times too. I love it.
So good.
It is good. And would you say your peaking strategy or your prep, because it was a small window between those two shows. So how did you, and you don't have to give away any, specific strategies or like secrets, but how was it different than maybe past experiences, or did you try anything new, or was your body like super on fire? Was it hard to respond?
I think my body was super on fire, because I think it was like I was a week and a half out, and I looked in the mirror one morning and I was like, I look good. And I don't really say that very often. usually I just kind of like go with it, show up every day. But I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the best I've ever looked. And that was at like a week and a half out. And then going into the show, even my husband was like, this is the best you've ever looked. And I was like, yeah. I will say something really different that we did this show, not on purpose, but it just ended up being this way, is I did not barely carb load the day of. So I did carb load the day before show, but the day of, I only had one meal before going on stage. And normally we do like a honey and salt pump up depending on how I'm looking. But I kept checking in with my coach like as the time to go on stage got closer. And Tiffany, Shane's wife, was backstage with us because he was like in the stands. And so I kept checking in with her and she's like, you look perfect. Like you look ready. I don't think we need anything. And so I actually went on stage pretty empty in terms of like food and carbs, although I wouldn't say I was empty at all because I did carb load the full day before and then had a meal of carbs like around 10 and went on stage at like 1. So I wasn't empty, but like I normally in the past have had either a full meal or like honey and salt before going on stage. And I felt really good. And I felt like I was able to keep my waistline tight. And yeah, that's something that was really different that I'd never done before. And it wasn't even planned that way. It was just like, keep communicating with coach and this is how it went.
Yeah, totally. I always find it fascinating, like leading into a show and when you're talking with your coach and how they're like, okay, we need to do this, or we need to do that. And you have to really let go and just trust them and not give in to like, well, last time this is what we did, or, oh, what about this? Or, seeing someone else do something, but really just sticking to your coach's guns and like trusting that is really important. And it obviously paid off for you. And I want to like do a little throwback to when you started competing as well, because something that I noticed was your hair color has changed.
Oh yeah.
So what inspired that change over the years? Was just like in life, that's how you were doing things, or did you change it for competing?
I definitely changed it just because of life. So the only thing I've ever changed because of competing was a suit color.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I started going blonde when I was in college just because I was like, ooh, I want to be blonde. My natural hair color is dark brown. And I just got to a point where it was so much maintenance. It was expensive. My hair was getting thin because, bleaching it all the time. And I was like, I need to go back to natural. And so I just jumped back to my natural color and then happened to step on stage with brown hair. And it was funny because one of the promoters out here in Oregon, when I stepped back on stage as a brunette, he's like, I didn't even recognize that it was you. And I was like, oh yeah, sorry. Because I had done 2 shows and won overall as a blonde and then went back as a brunette. And I was like, oh yeah, hey.
That's so awesome. And you said you've never changed anything for your presentation aside from your suit color. So what was the feedback you got? And do you feel like you've found like your look now?
So something that I really love about Shane and Tiffany is the devil is in the details. So they literally have control over suit color, jewelry. Like we want to get everything approved by Tiffany, like look wise, before stepping on stage. And so I had obviously my first show I wore red and I was blonde, and then I had switch coaches and Tiffany suggested a couple colors, and I had a suit made that was a little more purple that I wore at nationals, and we wanted it a little more blue. So I had another one made, and I think the blue is good. Tiffany has continued to say wear blue the last couple shows, and I've done well in that color. So until I step on the pro stage and hear differently, I think I love that color on me. So I think that's kind of the look right now.
That's awesome. Love that. Well, it's super cool too when we can like establish like what works best for us. And I think it's awesome that your coaches are paying attention to those details. And, we've talked about a lot of different things from your life to your relationship to, of course, your journey to becoming a pro. And I would love if you could just leave us with your best advice for girls who have never competed before but would like to, and then your best advice for girls who are on their road to pro.
Okay, so girls who have never competed and would like to, my best advice is get a coach that knows what they're doing from the get-go. And definitely do your research on that. Like, don't just pick the first coach you see on Instagram. Like, interview your coaches and pick the one that best, aligns with you. And be a student of the sport as well. So coach and be a student of the sport. Those are my best pieces of advice for girls who want to compete. And then girls who want to get their pro card, my best advice is be patient and be willing to work really freaking hard, because this sport is not for everybody. Just like not everyone is going to be in the NFL or in the NBA. Like, not everyone is meant to be a professional bikini competitor. So know that, do some reflection on yourself and your life. And if it's not working for you after a long time, maybe it's just not something that's for you. But again, put in the work for, a long period of time as well, if you really, really want something. So that's what I got.
Love that. Amazing advice for both types of competitors. And I really appreciate you sharing that and just honestly sharing everything that you did. I love that we got into so many different things together. And I want everyone to be able to, of course, reach out to you and connect with you as well. So can you share with them how they could do that?
Yeah. So I keep still a lot of all the competing stuff and bodybuilding stuff I keep on Instagram primarily, and my Instagram is just at Maeghan Egli, and my first name is spelt weird. It's Maeghan, Egli, Egli. And then Facebook, you can find me on Facebook as well under Maeghan Egli, and then my business page on Facebook is Maeghan Egli Ticor Title. And so if you're a realtor or a lender and like that side of things, then you can find me on there and find some information about that stuff.
Awesome. I'll make sure I put all of that in the show notes page. That way everybody can find it and connect with you there, which you guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. And Maeghan will have her own category. So make sure you scroll all the way down to the bottom if you're on mobile to find that, or on the side of your desktop if you're looking there. Of course, if you're listening to this right when it came out, then it should just be at the very top of the page. So you guys can always find the show notes and episode timestamps there as well, which is really cool. So if you want to go back to what was that quote Maeghan shared about her coach, okay, let's go back, and that should be there in the episode timestamp, so you guys can always find those golden nuggets you are looking for. And Maeghan, thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Of course, and I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you're in the world while you're listening to this episode.